Welcome to the second legislative forum in a series of 3 being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County during the 2024 Iowa legislative session. Today's forum focuses on issues related to health care. My name is Karen Franklin, and I'm pleased to facilitate today's conversation. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County, as is our timekeeper for today, Siri Felker. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. Excuse me. Membership in the League is open to anyone 16 years of age and older. Please join us. We can use your time, your talent, and your financial support for our ongoing operations. Government serves best when it is open and transparent. Democracy works best when more people are educated and involved. To learn more about the League, speak to one of our members or reach out to us through our website or Facebook page. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials during the legislative session. All Johnson County legislators were invited to participate. Sadly, Senator Driscoll and Representative Hora and Sherman did not respond to our invitation. But now I'd like to introduce our legislators in attendance. Senators in order of seniority: Zach Wahls, District 43, Janice Weiner, District 45, then our representatives in order of seniority, and then alphabetically, Dave Jacoby, District 86, Senior Dave, Amy Nielsen, Amy Nielsen, District 85.
I just felt my hair start to grow back.
Elinor Levin, District 89, and Adam Zabner, District 90. We'll start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually. And I'm going to start with Senator Zach Wahls.
Thanks, Karen. Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. And once again, it's obviously incredibly disappointing that our Republican colleagues have chosen to ignore the constituents who they represent in Johnson County. Johnson County deserves better. We deserve to have senators and representatives who show up and take questions from the public. And it is absolutely abhorrent that they are once again skipping this forum. It's obviously, we're past the first funnel, and so we've started debate this week in the Iowa legislature. In the Senate, we had debate on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. In the House, had debate all 4 days. In the Senate, we had a couple of high-profile pieces of legislation that we debated. One of those was the passage of what's called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA. This is something that Republicans in Iowa have been trying to pass for many years at this point. Essentially, what this would do is create a right to discriminate if providing a certain service or what have you goes against your sincerely held religious beliefs. It puts the freedom of religion in direct conflict with civil rights protections, and it was something that all of us on the Democratic side had a lot of concern about because we don't think that civil rights protections should be picked and chose just based on a person's individual religious beliefs. We believe that civil rights protection should apply to everybody, and so that was something that was a big part of the debate this week, and I'm sure Senator Weiner will have more to say on that topic as well. One piece just related to healthcare that also passed this week was a piece of legislation that would essentially extend Medicaid coverage postpartum. However, it would also reduce the income threshold that would allow folks to have that coverage. Now, that was essentially a compromise that Republicans made with themselves. Democrats have been calling for the extension of Medicaid postpartum for a full year for a very long time. And so it was a very we were in a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because if we were in the majority, we would have written that bill in such a way that that coverage would have you would have extended out for a full 12 months, but we would have kept the income thresholds where they were rather than lowering them. Ultimately, I was one of 3 Democrats who voted for that bill on final passage. All of us voted, all Democrats voted for an amendment that would have restored that language, that would have kept the extension while maintaining the income threshold. But I ultimately sided with 2 of my Democratic colleagues in voting for the bill on final passage, just because at the end of the day, we are going to be giving more aid to people who need it the most, even though that will unfortunately come at the expense of moms and babies who would have benefited from that Medicaid in those additional 6 months. I just personally felt like it was a step, however small, in the right direction. So I did get a couple emails about that this week, and so I just wanted to address that directly, but look forward to the questions today from the league.
Thank you. Thank you to the League for holding this forum. Thank you to my colleagues for showing up. Not just incredibly disappointed that our Republican colleagues are not here, but in the spirit of openness and transparency, I would go anywhere in this county for a forum, and they really should show up to answer people's questions. That's what government is all about. We work for you, and you should have the right to ask us questions. With respect to the bill that Senator Wahls was just talking about, I would add one more thing. The Republicans crafted it such that it is revenue neutral. In other words, it's not costing them anymore. And one of the reasons I voted against it is because I believe we as a state should be willing to spend the extra money to make sure that all those moms and babies are covered, including in their prenatal care and through the birth process. And that's not a revenue neutral thing if we're actually interested in promoting maternal health and child and fetal health. One other health issue that a lot of folks are talking about, in part because of a press conference that occurred here in Iowa City on Tuesday, is our cancer rates. Cancer rates were the #2 the state in the country in cancer rates. Our cancer rates are rising at an unacceptable rate. We need to be doing something about it. I know that a colleague, Representative Baith on the House side, has introduced some bipartisan legislation. I've introduced a bill on the Senate side that would fund research in 4 buckets, and that's because some researchers at the University of Iowa came to me this summer, said, to which Republicans should we talk? I gave them names as well, but I decided in the end that this was important enough, and they want to work with colleagues across the state, not just at the University of Iowa in terms of research. We have the expertise here. They want to work with colleagues to work on areas including pediatric cancer and other areas to do the research so that we can start tackling this problem. We can't just ignore it. And it's not, they talked about alcohol and binge drinking. That's one huge issue that contributes, but I think that we all suspect that some of the chemicals that are both in our water and in our soil are also contributing factors. And for that reason, there's another bill that's coming forward that would hold harmless some of the Monsanto and Bayer for Roundup and suits that come out of there, and that's also completely unacceptable. We should not be a donut hole. We should not be the hole in the donut, the only state that doesn't allow people to sue and win lawsuits for that. I would just add that another colleague of ours held a town hall up at UNI yesterday. And Eric Giddens was asking people who are studying to be teachers if they're going to stay in the state. Most of them said no. And they gave him a variety of reasons why. We need to start doing a better and a fair deal for Iowans so that they want to stay. Thank you.
Dave.
Well, good morning, and as always, thank you for the forums. It excites me when I see it on the calendar in Des Moines. I'm always a little eager to get home to Lynette and the girls being the dogs. And, I do like my human girls too, but they're in Denver. But it's good to get home, but look forward to that on the schedule. Know that I'll be seeing you over the weekend. On a very positive piece of news is that the Midwest Rail Pact cleared the House floor early this week, and this is a bill that I've authored and worked on for almost a decade. The history of it is simple. Years ago, Representative Libby Jacobs, a Republican from the Ankeny area, and myself pushed through the Midwest Rail Pact, and Iowa was a member of the Rail Pact, which discusses commerce and passenger rail lines in the Midwest. When President Obama was elected and Governor Branstad was reelected, he took us off the Midwest Rail Pact because he did not want to deal with any federal dollars, and he did not want to have the discussion about a rail line that would go from Omaha to Chicago. Well, on a bipartisan note, and thanks to Representative Zabner too for helping shepherd it through Transportation Committee, a number of people have come together, inclusively speaking, and said there's absolutely no reason that the state in the middle of the Midwest should not be with the Midwest Rail Pact. So we will officially rejoin as soon, and hopefully as it gets through the Senate. But I know the two senators here are champions over there, and I hear good things that it will reach the floor and pass. So I wanted to start off the day on a good note. There's some good things that are happening in Des Moines. Now we just have to keep that going.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you to the league, and thank you everybody for being here this morning. There have been some good things that have happened since the last time that we saw you here. One of them that is really exciting, I can't say because it's not my news, but you'll know it when you hear it. And I think we really, since we got past the funnel, that turns into just hurry up and wait time for us as we wait for the Republicans to get their stuff together and come to the floor with their bills. One of the things that I have found I really wish we could change is that there are actually some good bills up there that Democrats and Republicans would like to see passed. But the majority party will not bring them to the floor unless they have 51 votes. And there's 36 votes on our side. They could come over and get some and pass some really good stuff, but they won't do it. And so that's really frustrating. And it would be nice if we could contribute in that way. And since Dave had good news and we're going to end on good news, I'm just going to leave that little gripe there and move on. But thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning to the league and to everyone both here and watching either as we're live or afterwards. Thank you so much for hosting these forums. I too they are a bright spot in the calendar. And this week was just voting in the House. The week before I have one committee that met 4 times. I want to, since the topic is healthcare today, and Senator Weiner brought up soil health and water health, I wanted to mention something that happened not this past week, but the week before, which was, tiny bit of context, the Environmental Protection Committee, which I sit on, which a few of us sit on, met last year but didn't consider a single bill. We've considered and passed 2 bills out of that committee this year, and the most recent one would put a bounty on raccoons. That's what environmental protection looks like in Iowa right now, putting a bounty on raccoon tails. And I gotta say, we got pretty fed up about it. And there were some news articles some of you might have seen. And I feel good about what we had to say, because when it comes to environmental protection in Iowa, there's so much we could be doing. And it directly impacts our health and our healthcare systems, and our healthcare system needs that we are not doing anything. Because 5 years, 10 years down the road, boy, are we gonna wish we were doing something now about environmental issues. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. The only other thing I'm sure people are going to have questions about, we did talk state supplemental aid for schools in the House was debated on Thursday. We passed 3%. The House Democrats stood up for 6%, which would have made whole many of the 116 districts that are going to have to raise property taxes in order to fill the gap. It would have potentially brought ICCSD to a point that it would not need to be considering closing an elementary school. I found it particularly frustrating that on the floor, I read out the names of some of the districts that would have been positively impacted by that 6% rather than a 3% level. And I watched the folks who represent those districts just vote it down on party lines. In particular, I mentioned that the kids from Hills Elementary may end up getting bused into my district 6 miles north to Weber and to Alexander because their home school may close at 3%. And at 6%, that probably would not have to happen. So I thought that was something that Representative Hora should hear, and I said it on the floor. I mentioned it to her later, and it seems like she wasn't really listening when I said it. So that was a frustration for me. There were a lot of very minor good bills passed this week, some kind of minor bad bills passed this week, but state supplemental aid is the one that really stood out for me as the big deal on the floor this week. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for having us this week. It's good to be here. I'm excited to share that I passed a bill off the House floor 97-0 this week, House File 2364, which will, if passed by the Senate, so start talking to your senators, catalog opportunities for folks with disabilities in our state parks, and then create a web page and brochures in our parks so that folks with disabilities can plan trips, know where the accessible features are, and hopefully have greater access to outdoor experiences in our beautiful state parks. Very excited about that legislation. And really, I think it shows what the process here can be. This is a bill I worked on during the interim. I showed up in Des Moines, filed it on the first day. There were some problems with the bill I filed. I worked with, Republican chair of the Natural Resources Committee, who's from Plymouth County. I worked with Representative Turek, who has a disability, and the three of us were able to make some improvements as it went through the committee process and eventually get it passed on the floor. And so hoping that we can do more bipartisan legislation that makes people's lives better.
Well, thank you all for your updates. Appreciate it. At this time, we'll begin questions. First one from the league, followed by questions from our partner organizations, and then members of the audience. Our partner organizations today are the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, the Iowa City Free Medical Clinic, Johnson County Public Health, and Healthy Kids. We remind all participants that questions are limited to 1 minute. Please observe this time limit so that legislators can address as many questions as possible. And legislators, please keep your responses to 2 minutes. Our timekeeper will use cards to alert speakers when time is about up and when it is up. When alerted your time is up, you may finish your sentence, and then we will then move on. All legislators are welcome to join in responding to each question. So, the question from the league. The University of Iowa requested funding for a rural health initiative, and that request was not included in the governor's proposed budget. What legislative action do you anticipate or would you suggest to address the health services deserts throughout Iowa's rural areas? Anybody want to grab
I'll
that?
go first. So I sit on the Education Budget Subcommittee, which is where that request came. We had a fantastic presentation from the presidents of our Regents universities where they discussed the importance of the specific targeted asks they made, and President Wilson spoke eloquently and very clearly about the reasoning behind and need for this rural health care program. The questions that came from Republicans on the committee were attacking DEI. So what I would say is that our Regents universities, our healthcare systems, our healthcare providers are trying very hard to make rural healthcare work in Iowa and are being worse than ignored. They're being misdirected into nonsense fights over things that are literally required federally for programs to exist, rather than discussing the real issues of rural health care. That's to say we could still see that rural health care program in the budget, the education budgets that come out of the Senate and the House. And so I would recommend reaching out to those members of those committees, and saying to them, I've heard about this program and this request. I think this could really benefit. Talking to your friends and family who live in rural areas and asking them to do the same.
Anybody else want?
I'll just add, I think it was a great proposal from the university, and I would really like to see it go through. It's disappointing to not see it in the governor's budget. I also think sort of the elephant in the room when it comes to rural health care is reimbursement rates. Right now, if you look at, say, pediatric dentistry, the eastern half of the state, the University of Iowa is pretty much the only provider that's accepting Medicaid. And so if you think about what that means for a family in Keokuk who maybe has to make an appointment 6 months in advance, take a day off of work, drive 5 hours round trip just to take their kid to the dentist, and at the same time, there's a dentist in Keokuk who's losing out on that business, it's really not a recipe for success in rural health care and for our kids. And so that's really the big issue we have to fix.
I mean, in terms of the question about what's the proposal, I mean, I think that there's probably a lot of appetite to run that as an amendment when we do debate the budget for our Regents universities. So that would certainly be one vehicle to at least force that discussion on the floor of both chambers. But I do want to really just hone in on what Representative Levin just mentioned, which is that you essentially have, rather than any legitimate interest in solving problems for everyday Iowans, especially people who live in rural communities that are experiencing these acute health challenges, a focus on instead pouring gasoline on culture war issues that are used to divide Iowans and pit us against each other. That is what is happening in Des Moines. You're seeing that through legislation that is being brought forward, like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which we talked about earlier. And you're seeing that when it comes to things that should be as non-controversial as trying to address inequities that exist for our rural communities in this state when it comes to healthcare access. And so I think that it's just really important for all of us to be aware of what is actually happening under the Golden Dome, is that rather than trying to actually solve people's problems, the majority party is more interested in using divisive culture war tactics to divide Iowans, pit us against each other, rather than actually solve problems.
And I think that we should, anybody who knows people, has relatives in areas outside of Johnson County who live in healthcare deserts, ask them to ask their representatives and senators if they would support this. We need to be talking in both the House and Senate with our colleagues as well, and probably putting that amendment not just on the education bill, but when we get the HHS budget as well, because that's something that is really important for many Iowans. They just need to be able to access. They need the clinics, they need the doctors, they need funding so they can access health care.
I'll just mention the proposal. Obviously, this is not the only thing we could be doing for rural health care, but it does specifically address both mental health and maternal and primary care, which are specific areas of lack in Iowa and rural Iowa.
I think maybe the only thing that I would add onto this discussion would be Senate Democrats 2 weeks ago released a package of bills that were aimed at shoring up our long-term care system, which is, especially in many of the more rural parts of our state, really in crisis. And this is the result of a myriad factors, but that's something that I know is top of mind for Democrats all over the state. It's top of mind for Iowans all over the state. Who have family members who are in these facilities that are often both too expensive for patients, but also critically underfunded in many ways. That's something that we need to be doing a much better job of as a state if we want to be a place where people can grow old and call home.
And we initially asked for an oversight hearing, and within hours, Senator Sinclair, who runs the oversight committee, said no.
Okay, anybody else on that one? All righty, thank you. Okay, now we'll go to our partner organization questions, and I want to start out with Marguerite Oding from the Healthy Kids. Is Marguerite here? Okay, you want to come up?
I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you guys. I run a free clinic in Iowa City for uninsured kids. It actually serves all of Johnson County. And every year the legislature gives a stipend, a grant to free clinics across the state. And thank you for supporting that. And hopefully that'll go through again this year. And I'm also involved with the Academy of Pediatrics. And we are excited about the maternal health bill extending. We would really love it not to cut the percent of the federal poverty level at which women get covered and bump it up. I know one thing the governor has cited is that we're better than other states. And I think the legislature loses sight a little bit that we need to be a little better than other states in some aspects in order to keep our kids. So I have 3 adult children, all of whom have left Iowa. And some of the stuff that's happening in our state right now legislatively makes them a little less excited to come back. So, and I would love to have them back. So I think if they would think about that a little bit, all my kids are contributing to society. They do a great job contributing to Iowa. So I think it's short term to think that we don't need to be the best, because that was one of the things that brought us to Iowa in the first place. Good education, good health care, and a little short-sighted. But anyway, thank you for what the legislature is doing to support issues that I care about.
One thing we could have been doing to help our kids is to feed them. I would like to remind the not just folks here, but anybody listening, that we asked multiple times for the governor to accept summer EBT, which have been, I can't remember if it's 26 or 29 million, to feed
28 million with a 2.2 million administrative match.
which would have fed kids over the summer, and the other piece is that all of that money would have gone back into every community.
I'll make one more comment about that from the Academy of Pediatrics standpoint, is that one of the objections that the governor made to this program was about obesity. And
Feeding children doesn't cause obesity?
no, because actually when families don't have food, they can only afford foods that tend to be less nutritious, and everybody knows this, but that hopefully you will be hearing from the Academy of Pediatrics reaching out. We actually have been involved with the 5210 program since its inception, and the legislature's been very supportive of that, so hopefully we can make some connections there. But
Thank you, Marguerite. Anybody else want to make any comments on those issues right now?
Well, I think it's important when we are talking all the health issues that we'll be discussing today is that we're all coming from the same starting block when it comes to the revenues. The revenues are sitting rather strong in Iowa, over $1 billion in reserve, actually $1.4 billion active in reserve, and we'll know for sure coming up in March at the REC conference. The discussion right now is to reduce the income tax rates from the flat 5.7 to ratchet down to 3.5 or 3.65, and then eventually to 3.5, eventually to 0. Right now, with great comfort, you could still address taxes and still have more than enough to invest in the university's $12 million proposal to help our rural areas, the proposals to help expand money for our free clinics, and also to not reduce the number of eligible people for the maternal clinics. It's just plain goofy, and I like the way you mentioned it. Striving for mediocrity should not be what Iowa is looking to do. And as was mentioned earlier, we are number 1 and 2 in a couple areas. Cancer rates, number of people 18 to 25 leaving the state. The things that we are number 1 and 2 in, we would rather not be. But don't let anyone try to sell you that there ain't the money or that it has to be revenue neutral, because that's just bullshit.
Okay.
Fewest OB-GYNs.
On that note, is there anyone from NAMI who would like to ask a question at this time? From the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill? Okay. I'll move on to the Iowa City Free Medical Clinic.
Hi, I'm Jenny Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa City Free Medical and Dental Clinic. And similar to Marguerite, I don't really have a question other than how do you do it, because it's so discouraging just listening to the stories. But we really want to thank you for all that you do to expand access of service to all Iowans. In particular, I want to highlight there is also a healthcare desert right here in Iowa City and Johnson County, non-rural areas, and that's the uninsured. Those numbers have expanded as the Medicaid expansion phased out. And we also we're seeing a number of inquiries coming from what we call the underinsured. So they have insurance, but it's no good for what they need. In particular, dentistry, which you very much brought up, is a crisis for both adults and children. We're lucky enough to partner with Healthy Kids to try to get some kids access, but we lack the funds we need to fully develop those programs. So thank you for supporting Free Clinics of Iowa and for any legislation that you can support to try to call attention to this. And if it is cost neutral, helping people to understand, like, if they don't have access to health care, they end up in the ER, and that is a very expensive system. So thank you so much.
I would go ahead. I would also raise the point quickly that often folks who are uninsured don't have access to great, reliable transportation. And so I know there are people in this room who help provide transportation to get folks to their medical appointments. And thank you to everyone who takes it upon themselves to be a good community member like that. We have anti-immigrant legislation in the body that would do things like criminalize folks for giving someone a ride to a healthcare appointment. And I just think that I bring that up because I think it's sort of important to be aware of all the different angles that are coming at trying to stop people from accessing preventative health care that then would prevent them from needing emergency health care down the road.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your work. And, something that you mentioned, which is the end of the public health emergency and how it's impacted Medicaid, I think it's really been a story that's been lost, but is crucially important. In Iowa, since the public health emergency ended, over 160,000 people have come off of Medicaid. That's a huge, huge number of people. And there's a lot of tactics other states have used to address this problem. There's a large enrollment gap, that is to say people who are eligible for these programs but are not enrolled in them. I introduced legislation this year that would add a question to Iowa's tax return that is the most filled out state form by Iowans that essentially says, hey, if I'm eligible for Medicaid based on this information, please let me know. And that person would receive all the forms in the mail to then apply. 10 other states have done this now, and they've seen it decrease that enrollment gap. I want to thank Representative Jacoby, who put a lot of work into trying to get that bill a subcommittee. Unfortunately, Republicans have not given that bill a subcommittee meeting. But I think it would be a big step in the direction of making sure that Iowans who qualify for these programs are able to take advantage of them and get health care.
I'd like to just mention for a minute, since NAMI's not here, that there's a bill that just came through, that just had a subcommittee in the Senate. I expect it's going through the House as well. It's one of the governor's bills to combine the mental health and the substance use districts in the state. And while in the greater scheme of things, that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing, we need to keep a really close eye on how it's being funded, what's happening, what the bounds are, who's getting money, because the access centers are a part of this that may not get adequate funding, and it will affect everyone.
Okay.
We did have one bill that passed the House related that's actually a really good one, which just will make it more feasible for, if needed, folks who are in mental health distress to be transported to our access centers by ambulance if they don't have another safe means of transport. And it seems like a small thing, but that's actually one really good positive piece of legislation that did pass the House this week.
Okay, thank you. Anybody here from Johnson County Public Health?
Good morning. Nice to see you all again. I was excited to see several of you last week for Public Health Day on the Hill. Lots of questions today, so I'll try to keep it condensed. Again, thank you for the work that you've done on postpartum coverage. I would also encourage, if it's possible, to try to get that number back up. As it stands, that does kick about 1,500 women off of Medicaid for postpartum delivery, and we are one of 4 states in the country with rising infant mortality rates because we don't have good access to prenatal care. Again, Dave, as you said, things that we don't want to be number one in. Have to talk about Title 19 coverage and reimbursement. Again, increasing reimbursement, A, for maternal health so that we don't see rural hospitals having to close their birthing centers. And also for dental, 82% of Iowa counties are in dental shortage areas, including Johnson County. The wait to get in to the College of Dentistry is a year. And we have so many kids. We refer about 400 kids a month. They can take about 100. And so by the time we're getting them there, they are surgical and they have abscesses. It impacts their ability to learn, to eat, to go to school, again, impacting ER visits. A few other things I just have to mention. Janice, you mentioned the behavioral health bill. Very concerned about that because I listened to Kelly Garcia's webinar on it the other day. It's lipstick on a pig. You know, we're losing workforce. We're losing healthcare workforce. I have staff tell me that they don't want to stay in Iowa. Students from the College of Public Health telling me that they don't want to stay in Iowa. As a mother of a 1-year-old daughter, deciding within the next few years whether we're going to stay in Iowa because of education, because of the legislation, because of kind of the state of our country, or I'm sorry, the state of our state. So definitely things like, we have an aging population. My parents are here. My in-laws are here. I want to make sure that we have a healthcare workforce that will be here to take care of them and the resources adequate to do it. Last thing, I promise, vaccination. There has been so many anti-vaccination bills. Representative Nielsen, I have a letter for you as part of the Administrative Rules Committee on the rules that they're going to talk about on Monday about changing the requirements to get a notary for religious exemptions. We have already seen a huge increase in religious exemptions to vaccines. We have loss of institutional memory of what happens when we do not have one vaccine. We have measles in Minnesota. We have, an outbreak of measles in Florida. The R naught of COVID when it was really bad was 1.7. The R naught of measles is 18. We cannot mess around with this, and I think that there is just too much lackadaisical anti-science in the legislation around vaccines. So I thank you for the work that you have done, and I just encourage you to keep up the fight because Iowans and their healthcare outcomes really need this. Thank you.
So, a round of applause for that, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming up to the Hill and for being an advocate. I understand. Unfortunately, there's so much, I would say, willful ignorance that it's really, and it's hurting people, right? I mean, I think this is the biggest upshot of public health is that the decisions that you make really have impacts on other people. And I know the conversation that we had about measles is just a proof positive example of that. I was on a bill that Republicans introduced that would basically end the ability of minors to consent to having a HPV vaccine without their parents' written consent. You don't look. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that was just one of the more shocking pieces of. I mean, you're literally able to vaccinate against cancer, and Republicans are trying to limit the access to that. On a number of these topics, and just to be clear, by the way, Democrats did introduce an amendment that would have fully restored the Medicaid coverage in addition to extending it to 12 months. Unfortunately, it was voted down on a party line vote. But I presume that when that makes it over to the House, you'll see the same thing over there. So I want to say thanks for what you're doing. We know this is a really difficult environment, and we're really grateful for our public health folks day in, day out who are doing this work.
Did I see a bill out of the Senate this week that establishes non-vaccinated blood banks.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
It has a subcommittee in the House on Tuesday.
I did not see that, but I had heard from a number of people that work in health settings and it apparently would set up a separate blood bank from donors that aren't vaccinated. You know what? I'm okay with that. I've got a great idea. Then when I donate my vaccinated blood, then I only want it to go to vaccinated patients. So, I mean, I'm sorry, it's kind of goofy. I kind of mean that. But that's the kind of thought process that we're dealing with at times, that some people are thinking that. And I certainly hope if their families are in a crisis that they skip the goofy part and go right to helping the member.
You know, there's a reason the word public is in public health. And the reason is that health is not, the health of our community is not the result of a bunch of individual decisions. When I was in the 7th grade in Iowa City, and back then it was different people who were choosing not to get vaccinated. To be clear, I got whooping cough. No 7th grader should be getting whooping cough in the state of Iowa, state where people have access to these vaccinations. But unfortunately, despite the fact that I was vaccinated, there were enough unvaccinated students in the school that whooping cough was able to transmit, and I coughed for 3 months. And I'm lucky it wasn't worse than that. And there's just no reason that we should be letting these diseases come back. Unfortunately, it's become a political sort of game to some people, but there are really lives on the line for all these issues. And, we just have to take this issue much, much more seriously and view these people as a real threat. The other thing I wanted to mention, you talked about the maternal health care deserts. This week we saw the decision in Alabama regarding in vitro fertilization. House Democrats have introduced House Joint Resolution 9, which guarantees a right in Iowa's Constitution. It's a constitutional amendment to reproductive freedom. And something we've talked about for a while is that reproductive freedom is about a lot more than just abortion. I think we're seeing that where, previously it was the government deciding when you can end a pregnancy. Now it's the government deciding when you can start a pregnancy. In both cases, it's wrong. These are decisions that should be made by Iowa families with their physicians. And this is one where the legislature shouldn't be getting involved.
Amen. Anybody else want to?
To be clear, that our Republican colleagues tried to pretend it wasn't about vaccines, but it very much is. And I would just, further, more of these come up on the floor, I'm going to refer them to the cemeteries of the 1940s and 50s.
Okay. Now we'll take questions from the audience. Please make a line at the podium to ask your question. Remember to limit your question to 1 minute. All legislators will have an opportunity to respond to each question, and we'll each have 2 minutes to respond. So if we want to start here.
I will start.
Okay.
I'm Eileen Fisher from Solon, Iowa, and I'm the president of CAFE, Clean Air for Everyone. I know many of you know that organization. So tobacco still kills over 5,000 people a year. The best ways to reduce tobacco use is to tax the product, increase the price, and that's most effective for youth. And our Smoke-Free Air Act, which does not currently include vapor products. So those are two bills that we have been trying to get moved through the legislature. They don't seem to be going anywhere, but the reorganization of councils and commissions has had eliminated the Iowa Tobacco Commission, which has experts in tobacco prevention, community members, and youth representation on it. And that was in the bill to be, one of the commissions to be eliminated. But thank you to the people, to the House members who took that out of the bill, so that saved the Tobacco Commission. So I'm really grateful that you voted to do that. However, in the Senate, the Tobacco Commission is still eliminated, and Janice, I wanted to thank you for trying to get that out of the bill in the committee, but it stayed in. So we still have some work to do, and I would say that the tobacco, this is the one voice, the one place where Iowans have a chance to voice their opinion and let legislators, let the department and the Tobacco Use Prevention and Control Division know what's actually happening on the ground. We have an epidemic of vaping among youth. Tobacco companies have targeted youth, and yet there are bills just recently introduced in the House that would define vapor products, heated tobacco products, as cigarettes, and then later in the bill it eliminates them from being taxed. So that's, I think that Philip Morris International is the only lobbyist in favor of that. There's another one that Altria wants, and this is to create a registry of all of these alternative tobacco products. It would cost a lot of money, so there's no revenue, there's no request for how much is this going to cost to make the registry. So that's an important question that needs to be asked about that. And thank you for your work.
So Representative Zabner, did the bill die on the House side, House Study Bill 710 or whatever it was, Representative Bloomingdale's bill? Because in many ways, this whole boards and commissions review is a big healthcare issue, because there are many licenses, there are many healthcare groups, whether it's tobacco or others that are part of it. And there are two very competing visions of it right now. One is Representative Bloomingdale's on the House. Her view, she actually did the hard work that the Boards and Commissions Review Committee failed to do this past summer. She went and talked to folks, she listened to folks, she narrowed it down, she did a first cut on boards and commissions that really are moribund and don't need to be here anymore. Whereas the folks on the Senate side who were not involved in that process this past summer, Representative Zabner and I were both ex officio members of it, just took the governor's bill, and while they claim to be listening to some Iowans, I don't really believe they are. And that bill is huge and expansive, and everybody needs to continue to pay attention to it.
So I sit on the Iowa Tobacco Prevention Commission, does very important work, and obviously we're seeing a time where tobacco use is on the rise with young people, and so it's an even more crucial time for that commission. Representative Nielsen and I worked with Representative Bloomingdale in the House on that Boards and Commissions bill, and we were very clear that that was a commission. We would not support any bill that eliminated that commission. And so I'm grateful that we were able to get it out of the House bill. I think the House bill is much better. But I think you're completely right. We need to take this whole issue a lot more seriously, closing the casino loophole, and then having serious conversations about how we're going to take on the crisis of vaping in teenagers.
And the House version did make it through funnel, but hasn't been passed on the floor yet. So yeah, the House version made it through funnel, but has not been passed on the floor yet.
Thanks, that's good.
And the Senate study bill also made it through the funnel.
Yes.
So. Other questions from the audience?
Hello, I'm Miriam Timmer-Hackert, parent who's actually considering leaving Iowa myself, getting my kids out of here. My daughter wants to be a teacher, and I'm like, there's lots, like Minnesota's really nice, you know, for teachers. Illinois is close by. But I'm wanting you guys to remind me where we are on abortion. We have a 6-week ban that's currently in the courts.
Right.
So it's not being enforced right now, but it could be, like, the courts could say that it's okay to ban abortion at 6 weeks. Is that right?
We're waiting for the Supreme Court to set a hearing date and to hear that this spring. We don't know yet when that will happen, and then we expect them to rule by the end of June. So that at that point we will know whether or not that ban goes into effect. The Board of Medicine has now passed rules, which did not happen the last time. The rules, in a medical term for you, suck. They have a few more medical terms in them, but they are not at all helpful.
And I just want to mention, I know League has positions on this specific topic and did do some great advocacy work specifically around those rules, decision-making, rulemaking, and I just want to thank you for that. Thank you, Lily. If Kieran and Lily decided to take over the world, we'd all be screwed. If Kieran and Lily decided to take over the world, we'd all be screwed.
Testing, testing. Hello? All right. Well, I'm just following up on the boards and commissions. So I've heard statements that the one in the House is better. I'm curious to hear, because I've noticed that nobody has actually said it is good, and so I'm curious to see if you would agree with that. And second, since I know a couple of you were on that commission over the summer, I am interested to hear, was that an executive or a legislative committee? And the reason I ask is because I know that you all on the legislature are immune to freedom of information requests. But if it was an executive committee, I assume it wouldn't be. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
It was an executive committee. The legislators who were on it were simply ex officio members. We had, we were able to speak, but we otherwise had no rights. The way that committee operated was they, in order to ignore public meetings laws, they created subcommittees of 2 people. I think Representative Zabner and I were never able to find out. And I think you asked specifically, right? I also asked specifically to be apprised of when the various subcommittees were meeting because I wanted to try and join them. I never heard a peep from any of them. The minutes and the agendas were so sparse as to be probably in violation of open meetings laws. They did have one public hearing, but it was less of a process and more. And even though they took a few of the public comments and took those out of their recommendations, it was more of a pushing through what they wanted and less a listening to the public exercise.
Yeah, I think this idea has become a little twisted because what the governor is trying to do and what she says she's trying to do are 2 different things. So what she says she's trying to do is take a look at all the boards and commissions and find the ones that are no longer needed. And I think that's actually a smart thing to do. You know, Iowa has been around for a long time. The legislature often looks at complicated ideas that they don't want to fix and says, why don't we create a board? And some of these boards are no longer needed, and I think that's the case of most of the ones that are in the House bill. What the governor was doing, you know, there is a far-right idea that licensure should not exist, that, you know, if you want a dentist, you should go to your neighbor's house and, you know, they'll take care of it for you, and, you know, if it doesn't work out, you'll probably go to someone different next time. And the Senate bill is really
how many teeth left?
The Senate bill is really a bill about licensure. That's what they were doing over the summer. Now, there was a summer commission, like Janice mentioned. It was a bit of a farce. I'm not convinced they actually held subcommittee meetings. All the voting members were essentially lackeys of the governor. Almost all of them work in the executive branch. And really, the recommendations they wrote did not make a whole lot of sense if you talk to people who actually work on those boards and commissions. The one other thing I wanted to mention about boards and commissions, because it's passed the Senate, we're debating it on Monday, is the gender balance requirement. There's a bill to remove the gender balance requirement on boards and commissions, particularly frustrating to me because it was one of my predecessors, Minette Doderer, who worked so hard in the 80s to put this gender balance requirement into place. I think Iowa was the first or second state to have such a requirement. And it's really sad. I think it'll make our boards and commissions much less representative of the people of the state of Iowa. They won't do as good of work. And I think it's really important to say, you know, they continue to say this should be about finding the best person. We shouldn't consider gender. The truth is we have a lot of rules on who serves on boards and commissions. You know, I'm sure you could find enough smart people in Des Moines to fill every board and commission, but we've decided we should have geographical constraints because we want a board that's representative of the whole state, not just Des Moines. Some of the boards have partisan requirements so that you don't have 9 Republicans or 9 Democrats on the Board of Regents. Some of them have licensing requirements, so they'll have members who have a specific licensure and members who are representing the public. And really, these boards should be representative of everyone in the state of Iowa. And so we've fought against that bill. We'll continue to fight against that bill on the floor.
Actually, my youngest daughter liked the bill at first read because she sent me a text that said, "This is great, Dad. The boards and commissions will be all women." I go, I said, well, that's an interesting take. That's not exactly what it says, Anna, but I'm glad you're paying attention. It's that time of year, you know, we're after the first funnel. We're heading into March. It's an even number year, which means it's an election year. So what you're seeing is a lot of political choreography. In other words, you know, the statement was made moments ago, well, at least the House bill is better than the Senate bill, which is better than the governor's bill. Well, it's all choreographed. They know what they're doing. This isn't just happenstance. This is how they set you up, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, shoot. At least the House, the final bill is a lot better than what we started with. And the perfect example of that is the rollout for AEAs. We see it being pared down, but if you looked at what's in front of you right now, if that was your first glance, you go, that's a piece of junk. So we have to be careful to make sure we keep our level of fight the same, even when the political choreography hits and this, where it says, well, this isn't as bad as it could be. No, it's still bad, and it's not good for Iowa.
If I could add a couple more things on boards and commissions, one on what Representative Zabner was talking about on I found a great history, which I'm still need to read through on the whole boards and commissions and gender balance and so forth process and how it came to be. And one of the fascinating tidbits was using the same argument now as they did then to try and prevent gender balance from getting on. We just want the most qualified person. The other thing to know is that the Senate version of the boards and commissions bill has much more than just cutting out some boards and commissions and merging others. It creates a whole literally A to Z process of questions that they would have to answer in order to create one. It creates another A to Z process for questions that they would have to answer in a rolling 4-year process of reviewing them. And it creates a mandatory sunset for everyone. It would overload admin dial, and it would overload the Legislative Services Agency, and it would take away prerogatives of the legislature. So it does much more than just take away boards and commissions. And I actually happen to think that Representative Bloomingdale's bill isn't just like a better bill. I think it's actually a good bill as opposed to some of these others.
I would just, for a little bit of context for those who aren't wonky enough to have read 3 versions of the bill, the part that stands out to me the most about the Senate version and the governor's original recommendation, if we're talking about like a reasonable review of boards and commissions, one would not, I don't think, come to the decision that boards and commissions should be merged just purely based on the fact that they have the same word in the name. So for example, respiratory therapy, massage therapy, and OT-PT, occupational and physical therapy. These are very different fields, but they all have the word therapy in them, so they're getting merged. The other one that really just made me, our sense of humor gets skewed in the legislature, but made me giggle, was architecture with landscape architecture. Not the same requirements. So just for a little context, that's what we're talking about in some of the versions of the bill. Also, I would just mention, because this seems like the right group to mention it to, get ready to nominate your female friends for boards and commissions, because we're doing all the work anyway.
Except Adam Zabner, who had his bill passed this past week. He's a good.
And Dave.
And Zach. They're all doing a great job. I don't want to start any wars
I'm
here.
just kidding, mostly, sort of.
It works, it works for me. I'm the only male in my household. That's my wife, 2 daughters, 3 dogs, and I'm pretty sure the lizard. So I can live with that, and actually it'd probably be a better world. But one thing I want to close in on this topic too, when we're talking about reviews for boards and commissions, we still hesitate. We still have not done a single review of tax credits. We haven't done a single review of the corporate giveaways that we do at the state level for our very large corporations in the state. We haven't done a review to see if the property tax bill of 2013 actually worked. We refuse to review the things we've done over the last decade to see if they indeed have been successful or not. So it's interesting that we're looking at boards and commissions, but we stay away from the big reviews, the tax expenditures. We have to keep pushing, saying, listen, let's sit down and talk about the tax credits and see which one of them work. Currently on the books, I believe there's 141 tax credits. Now, are they working? I don't know, because we haven't reviewed them.
Before we leave the board and commission question, are there potential changes to specific health service-related boards that we should be aware of in terms of how they're going to change it for appointment of members or the responsibilities that you're aware of?
Yeah, I would say we should be concerned about all of them. And it's not just the health services ones, it's also some of the licensure and just like public safety ones. So the plumbing board and the electrical board, they don't need to be combined. And all of the boards, we're seeing that the governor is asking for, mostly removal of people who have the expertise to run those boards, and it's starting to become more of a just a political appointment of whoever, so as far as the best person for the job, whether they're whatever their gender, it's all about the governor appointing who she, thinks is going to do the best job. That's one of the most difficult things about this is just watching the stripping of these boards and commissions and the expertise that Iowans have and the expertise they have to keep Iowans safe. It is absolutely unbelievable, and we had the same discussion and fight last year during the original bill, and we're still fighting that on the boards and commissions bill. So I can't say I would single out one part in particular, and Representative Bloomingdale's bill is fairly good. She did do the research, and I was very happy that she included me on the work on that bill, and that we were able to get it through the state government committee before funnel. So I would still pay really good attention to all of it.
Yeah. One thing I'll add, it's a different bill, but also deals with boards and commissions. Republicans want to put 2 legislators on the Board of Regents. I'll just say on Thursday, the Iowa House did a resolution honoring Caitlin Clark, and they lost by 17 points. I think that shows what happens when the legislature gets involved. They also want to pay the members of the Board of Regents. To Representative Nielsen's point, it seems like the qualification process for the Board of Regents is who writes the biggest check to the governor. So that's a questionable proposal in my book.
A little insight to Representative Bloomingdale. I've worked with her on a couple tax issues because that's what she does in her other life. Representative Bloomingdale was the only Republican that survived a primary onslaught from the governor last year. So I'm sorry, in 2022. So that's an important piece to know.
Interesting. Okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, Diane Duncan Goldsmith. Several things going on with boards and commissions. I am a retired registered dietitian in the state of Iowa. licensure is one of the things that is on the table for dietitians. Again, talking about public health, the goal of having a trained dietitian license is to keep you safe when you need nutrition advice. The other thing, the piece about boiler inspectors, we, I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, because I've been retired 12 years, we had pressure steamers. Those steamers had to be inspected every year to be sure that the shell was still intact, so that while some of my staff were steaming whatever, they didn't explode into the kitchen. So that was a concern. The other thing, another issue, training. I saw something about training being provided by tax dollars for nursing home administrators or staff. I don't know if that's still dead or alive or where that is. I was concerned about me having to pay for the training that as a dietitian, I paid for the licensure and training and continuing ed that I needed to maintain my status as a dietitian. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank you for your efforts for trying to get universal meals for children in the state of Iowa. When I retired from the district, we had about 34% free and reduced, lots and lots of student debt. The states that have expanded, California, Minnesota, I think Nevada, the Northeast, there are so many states that are actually looking at and providing universal meals. School meals are the healthiest meal a child can get when they're in school, and I certainly thank you for your efforts in trying to get that through. I just don't understand why, when we have a governor who, no offense to anyone in here, is busy wearing a little golden cross around her necklace and supposedly being so Christian-like, she couldn't care less, or appears to be providing quality food nutrition for the children of this state. So thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, I mean, if only there was like a story from the gospel about feeding the hungry. I don't know. Maybe that would be helpful to remind them. But I appreciate the comments and to the specific question about the bill related to the state ponying up to pay for training for administrators in long-term care facilities. That bill did get out of committee, I believe, and so is eligible for floor debate. Whether or not that actually moves forward is another question. But that's just like such a perfect example of a complete misunderstanding of what the problem is and trying to solve it in exactly the wrong way.
Really appreciate the comments, Diane. Do you have a birthday coming up? Okay, that's it. I think. Okay, that's it.
So with respect to nursing homes and so forth, the package, that what the bill that you refer to is exactly the opposite of what we as a Senate Dem caucus introduced. Senator Celsi and I spent the intersession talking to people and putting together legislation. And the package that we introduced, which Senator Wahls had mentioned, includes a bill, includes 4 different bills. It includes a bill that would create an oversight commission and also hire more inspectors, because we're way behind on inspectors, have a certain, require a certain rhythm and inspections, sort of a whole, the whole universe around that. It has a bill that would try and help improve the workforce, because they don't get paid anything basically, and they literally have 100% turnover every year. So it would try and increase the wages over a specified time. It would also increase Medicaid stipends that haven't changed since 2002, so that people who are in nursing homes would have a little bit more money per month to do things like get a haircut or various other things. And finally, there's a bill that would both take a look at and study and expand alternatives to nursing homes, so that you have more alternatives to allow people to age in place and live in their communities.
Okay.
Grow your hair back too.
Good morning, Nancy Porter. Thank you very much for being here and for sticking it out. You people are absolutely high on the list of the kind of people we need in our legislature, and you do the work, and you work so hard. and we all appreciate it, or we wouldn't be in this room with you. Looking forward to Monday. I understand there's going to be a little labor rally around the Capitol, and we haven't looked at minimum wage for a long time. We haven't looked at some of the needs that laborers have to support their role in the community and their jobs. And now there's a bill floating around, and I know you understand to which I refer, and it's the one concerning the fact that we're just going to let management decide everything, who my workers are, and what will be happening. So I just wonder if you have an outlook on next week.
Well, that'll be fun for sure. We had a day last week where the Teamsters came and drove around the block and honked their horns for a good solid 2 hours, and it was really cool to see. I mean, honestly, it really was. I remember when we did Chapter 20 back in 2017. It was great to see that many people there. And the thing is, there's still that much concern and care and advocating for workers' rights. House Democrats, we have our People Over Politics platform, and we have introduced numerous bills that would help our workers. One of them, the least of which, is raising the minimum wage, which has, as you said, has not been raised since 2007. But yeah, we just continue to see the more union-busting bills come through from the Republicans, and all the anti-worker, the child labor, laws being lessened, and with what just happened in Sioux City, it's really distressing to see how we trust some Iowans, but we don't trust all Iowans, and the ones that seem to have the most trust of the Republican Party are the ones that write the biggest checks. And I really hate to say that, because I want to have more faith and more trust in how democracy works. But that is what we're seeing. It's what we saw with the boards and commissions. It's what we're seeing with all the labor things that have been introduced. So next week will be fun. I hope you're coming up, Nancy.
I hope we have another airplane with the same banner. Gosh, yes. We can't say what was on the banner. But Amy referenced Sioux City, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with what's going on in western Iowa, but it's been uncovered that they're using child labor.
Overnight.
Oh yeah, even child labor is worse. It's overnight. It's anyway. That's the kind of Iowa with the labor situation that they're allowing to tap into. Is children are working overnight in factories when indeed they should be sleeping and getting ready for school.
What was particularly fascinating to me about that story was that even with Iowa's child labor laws being in violation of federal labor laws, this plant is still in violation of Iowa's child labor laws, which is just...
Right. The bill to which you're referring, Nancy, the Senate bill is an attempt to do what they didn't completely manage to do in 2017. They hope that with the ridiculous recertification requirements that they put into Chapter 20 in 2017, that they would effectively kill public sector unions. But the fact is that 98% of them have survived, and so some folks seem to feel, some of our Republican colleagues seem to feel that they need to make another attempt to do that. I am happy to hear, though, so far that it doesn't sound like the votes are there in the House. So we'll see if they bring it to the floor in the Senate.
No predictions in the House here? Okay.
Save your day, no
predictions.
Well, we're still stung from the House resolution and then the outcome of the Iowa women's game. So we're not going to make any more predictions.
Any other questions from the audience?
So much. Good enough. You tell me. Yeah. Perfect. Hello, my name is Ben Grauer. I'd like to raise your attention to a bill that has passed out of HHS committee in the House called Work Without Worry for an expansion for Medicaid for employed people with disabilities. I think that this would impact a huge number. I mean, to follow up with the workforce comment, that would be, incredibly impactful. Currently, there are 12,000 people that benefit from MEPD, but the current income and asset limits are too low. And so when we think about 250% of the federal poverty level being the maximum income, and then an individual can only have $12,000 in assets and a couple only $13,000. This is an incredible disincentivization to work. And so within this current bill that's been proposed, and again is passed out of HHS committee and on the floor, we would raise those asset limit or income limits to 450% of the FPL, and there would be no asset limits testing. And this would really empower people with disabilities to find the employment that they need and also address workforce issues potentially. An argument that I would hope would resonate with those that might be more conservative is that marriage penalty that would be addressed. If you want to talk about growing families and things like that that they claim to be so important, we shouldn't be penalizing people for getting married and being married with a disability. I will also point out that this week there was a Senate bill that came forward that claimed to address that marriage penalty, but by raising the couple's asset limits to a huge princely sum of $24,000, and that's it. And it does nothing to address the actual income limits that are so important. And I think that Representative Wahls, you were on the committee for the twin bill that was introduced by a conservative legislator in the Senate that was not moved forward. And so if we can kind of be aware of that and hopefully progress that legislation at the same pace, that would be great. And then again, just being aware of the intricacies of that kind of bill. And also, I forgot to talk about how to pass out a subcommittee, the HHS, they did add in what they're calling right to repair. And so currently, if an individual has a disability and needs to repair their equipment, they have to then go back to their doctor and get a prescription. And they've already been prescribed this equipment, and there's no reason to kind of do that. For instance, I broke my chair a while back, and I was told to then wait for months and months before I could get that fixed. And this is the only chair that I have. I can't then wait around for that to get repaired. So yeah, I mean, just anything you can do to kind of just be educated about MEPD expansion, and then talking to those other legislators that are out there that do support it, but maybe don't necessarily know how impactful it would be, especially maintaining those limits we're hoping to get to. So thanks a lot.
So yeah, I'm happy to speak. And can you share your name one more time?
Ben Grauer.
Ben.
Yep.
So I was assigned this bill in the Senate, and unfortunately, the person who was the chair of that bill, that bill subcommittee, Jeff Edler, refused to schedule a subcommittee, so it didn't even get a hearing in the Senate.
On Tuesday, I believe.
Correct. So now the bill has moved over to the Appropriations Committee, and the reason it's there is because the Appropriations Committee isn't subject to the same restrictions on when bills can be considered that other policy committees are. So the proposal is still alive in the Senate, but to your point, it's basically been completely gutted. I mean, it's not work without worry anymore at all. It's just not even the same thing. And so, unfortunately, it's a really good illustration of, I think, the different priorities that exist within the different caucuses at this point between the Democrats and the Republicans, where I think that you saw in the House there was some real bipartisan support for this, and Representative Turek, who, if you all haven't heard yet of Representative Turek, you will at some point. Keep your eye out. He's absolutely an incredible legislator over from the Council Bluffs area. But he did incredible work in getting that bill moving in the House. And then he found a Republican to introduce it in the Senate. But Brad Zahn, who introduced that bill in the Senate, did zero work, put zero pressure on Jeff Edler to schedule a subcommittee. And Brad, unfortunately, was willing to let that really die on the vine. And so I think it's still too soon to say how that's all going to shake out, but I don't think that there should be any comparing the bill that was reintroduced in the Senate that is, compared to the bill in the House. They're just completely different.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Donna, you did say in that subcommittee meeting that if Zahn's bill doesn't advance, she's going to be asking for a whole lot of amendments to what Edler proposed in the Senate, but who knows how those get taken up. So.
Yeah. The good news is that Jeff Edler is not running again in 2024, which is going to be
know anything about.
Yeah, that's a very welcome change. Unfortunately, I'm not necessarily. It's a little bit of like what's behind door number 2, so we'll find out.
Yeah, I'll just say, first of all, no one works harder than Josh Turek, who's brought both these bills forward in the House out of Council Bluffs, won a very tough district that Trump actually won in 2020 by fewer than 10 votes. And I'm really thankful for his work on both these issues. I'm hopeful we'll see them on the House floor. And really, I think it's important at this stage to reach out to members of the House and Senate about this issue. I think there's a lot of people who still don't really understand work without worry or right to repair. And I think when you explain it, it becomes very clear in terms of, someone's on vacation, their wheelchair is broken, and they're supposed to go back to their doctor and schedule an appointment to get a prescription to fix it. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's also important to know who's fighting at least the right to repair bill, which is the managed care organizations. Iowa privatized Medicaid. There are companies that have a lot to gain from not fixing people's wheelchairs, and so they're up there fighting this. And it's really important, I think, to call that out. And we need to pass both these bills. I think they'd be transformative.
Yeah.
I've worked on right to repair for years, and thank you for bringing it up, Ben. What exactly did you need to work on your chair? Is it the manual itself or the equipment? What is it you needed to repair?
I had to repair the backrest. And so fortunately, I work at the University of Iowa, and I have combined insurance, and it was odd because I actually still qualify for MEPD, but that was not well explained to me. So I recently got off of it, but I reapplied, obviously. But in that, I was not expecting to ever have to have any sort of appointment or prescription from a doctor because I have University of Iowa insurance. And so I only learned that was a requirement when I was still on Medicaid, transitioning off of it, and I was being told to wait and wait and wait and wait by those providers. And so with enough advocacy and pressure, I was able to get them to move that forward without that requirement. But it was definitely eye-opening to kind of see that something that is so important, and I mean, I can't go around without my wheelchair, obviously. And then to tell someone that, just hold off for like a month, it's just not an acceptable answer. And again, I mean, that then points to work without worry as well. I mean, at what point do I need to be so concerned with how much money I'm making when Medicaid is the only insurance provider that will give care like custodial and home care? I can't get that through the University of Iowa. If I needed it, luckily I don't. I very well could in the near future. And so then to have to consider whether or not working is feasible because I need that specific care only afforded by Medicaid, again, becomes just kind of a silly question to even ask.
Thank you, Ben.
Can I just point, Ben, thank you for sharing this and for bringing this to the attention, not just of the legislators who are sitting here, but the public.
Well, right. And there's, again, not enough people are just aware that people with disabilities are so threatened.
Correct.
Just for wanting to work like everybody else and have families.
And Ben, this is precisely why it is so insulting that Senator Driscoll, Representative Hora, and Representative Sherman are not present for today's forum. You deserve to have your story heard by those legislators. They should be here, and they're not, and it's abhorrent. So So thank you for sharing this perspective, and I hope that you'll continue working with the other folks who are pushing for this legislation, because I think what I'm hearing from you, somebody who wants to work, somebody who wants to be a productive member of society, who is willing to rise to meet the challenges that you're facing, and you're being held back by the state. And like, that's awful, right? The state should be doing everything that it can to be supportive and empowering. Instead, you're getting the opposite, and that's wrong.
And many rural Republicans have fought for a right to repair for their farm equipment.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that we ought to be able to lobby them to get this through.
And John Deere does not like that.
And I find that on these particular bills, what's really helpful is those personal stories. Like Ben, I know you've been sharing yours and advocating. Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me share your story. I have personal friends and Iowans that I know whose stories I've been trying to share. I know someone who was born with spina bifida, does not use a wheelchair, uses crutches, but would need adaptive controls on a car in order to be able to drive. Well, owning a car with those adaptive controls would automatically put them over the asset limit. So they haven't driven. They haven't had a license. They got their license at 16, let it lapse, and never drove again. I know someone who is underemployed. I know someone whose work wants them to work more hours, but they will lose their benefits if they work the hours that their work needs them to work. These are the stories that are, I think, what we need to be sharing. And so, like, I have reached out to those people I know and told them, hey, contact your legislators, contact the subcommittee members, and I try to make it as easy as possible because I know that this is where my brain is, but those folks are worried about living their daily lives. And so if you have people in your lives who you know have stories that should be shared, either just ask permission to share their stories for them, with or without their name on it, or try to help them to make it as easy as possible as you can for them to get those stories to the folks who need to hear them. Because it genuinely is, when you hear what the day-to-day impact would be of passing these pieces of this, now one piece of legislation, and how much it could improve Iowans' lives and Iowa's economy, it's a no-brainer. Genuinely. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Is there anyone else who has a question from the audience? Okay.
You're too tall to ask a question, Brian.
Hi, my name is Brian Flaherty. Just hopefully a really quick question. I'm not asking for all the details here, but the words funnel and subcommittee and a bill alive and a bill dead have been used today. Could someone briefly give a description of the process that you all follow through and kind of where you are right now in the process of those with regards to those terms?
You said briefly, that's you, Dave.
All right, briefly, no bill is ever really dead during the session, but the funnel is the first wrap-around windmill that you see what bills are going to remain alive throughout the session. Leadership can bring any bill back at any time, but generally it takes out 100 bills of the mix that you're considering at the point in time. Subcommittee is the coolest thing in the world. Subcommittee is either 3 or 5 people working on a bill when it's first introduced before it goes to full committee. It is the one point in time that anyone that's at the committee or online can make a comment. So in a subcommittee, if you're there at the state capitol, you can make a comment on that bill, whether you're directly interested or just want to give a comment. It moves kind of fast, but what's important, and I think what part of Brian's question is too, is just paying attention to the legislative calendar. And right now, Ways and Means and Appropriations will be very busy committees because those committees are funnel proof. Anything that we deal with in terms of appropriations and tax law are live rounds now until we actually sine die. Sine die is the term that, thank God, session is over. And that means we adjourn. So, sorry, Brian, I know you wanted more, but I really appreciate the question because it's very important when people are following the legislative process.
So when somebody introduces a bill, it has to go to a subcommittee,
Correct.
and then it goes to the full committee.
All bills should go through a subcommittee.
Okay.
Not all bills do, but all bills should at least be considered by a subcommittee in the committee in which that bill is assigned.
Okay. But then it has to go through the full committee.
And then through the full committee, and then once it goes through the full committee, it'll either go to Approps or Ways and Means or directly to the chamber floor for consideration.
Okay. Okay. So there's a number of steps there where it could be successful or it could be killed.
Successful and/or changed.
Okay. And then things
think
can
it's
hold
important.
over for the next session as well, or they come back.
Thank you for that, Karen. It's a 2-year General Assembly, so anything introduced in the odd number year is still active for the even number year. So it's a 2-year General Assembly. So our General Assembly this year is 2023 and 2024. But coming back in January of 2025, all bills would have to be reintroduced.
And I think it's important, to Brian's question about bills dying. Most bills don't die because they lose a vote. They die because they get to a point in that process and a vote is never scheduled. One example, my colleague Sammy Sheets out of Cedar Rapids has a bill for universal school lunch in Iowa's schools with 56 co-sponsors in the House. So a majority of the House has co-sponsored that bill, but leadership refuses to even assign it a subcommittee meeting. And so, none of them will ever vote against the bill because they know it would look bad politically, so instead they just refuse to schedule the vote, despite the fact that the bill has a majority of support in the Iowa House of Representatives.
And there's no way to override that?
No, what they'll do is each committee has so-called kill subcommittee. So it will have two Republican members, at least on the Senate side, will have 2 Republican members, 1 Democratic member, but they know that when it's assigned to that specific subcommittee with those 2 Republican members, they will never schedule a subcommittee meeting. So that's what happens to most of our bills that we introduce. It's what happens to bills such as last year's and probably this year's attempt to rein in eminent domain that may pass on the House side. It will be assigned to a kill subcommittee on the Senate side and not move forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, me again.
One more.
Diane Duncan Goldsmith. One question I did forget to ask, with the changes in the SNAP eligibility guidance, is there any data to show how that impacted those who are approved eligible? One of the concerns that some school nutrition folks had was that direct certification, which is a process by which children are automatically approved for free meal benefits, might be impacted if their families lost SNAP. And I sort of tried to get information from the Nutrition Services Department of Ed folks. That data seems to be a mystery. So I wondered if there was any follow-up on how that bill actually impacted Iowa families.
You might have more information than we do.
I don't know.
If I can just say, that's a really good question. Anecdotally, what we are hearing from across the state is that it is so cumbersome to apply that people are just not. And so then they are then using their food pantries more frequently, which I know our board supervisors support, but also have been struggling to make sure that they are meeting the needs. And we continue to see, one of the concerns that we also have, we have to worry about the state, and then we also have to worry about the federal government and whether we're going to shut down and lose access to WIC, because we continue to see people be eligible. And we're looking at wait lists for the first time in years. So there is still a need, especially with food prices going up. This is really concerning. And Representative Zabner, you mentioned the Medicaid, basically with the end of the COVID emergency, people getting kicked off. I will say, with the alignment of legacy IDPH and DHS going to IHHS, that application is so challenging, and nothing can be put into a language other than English. The majority of the people that we've asked, we see 99 counties, 99 local health departments paying to translate documents that the state should be able to give us in French, in Arabic, in Spanish, in Marshallese, so that we could easily get information out to our community members. But it's such a challenge, and I called our local DHS because our office, if you've never been to local public health, is right across from the DHS entrance. And we get a lot of people who walk over because they're not being helped there. And we had to take the last names off of our staff offices because they would look for Hispanic sounding names and basically just commandeer their time to say, please help me. And we would do the best we can, but we needed to help our WIC clients. We needed to help our immunization clients. So the no wrong door, that the alignment has really meant no door. Because I remember asking Kelly Garcia if there would be money coming down to the local level to help us help folks, because that's why we're there, And so again, a bigger stress to my concern about the alignment that they're looking at for local public health, for community access, for WIC, for maternal child care services, getting away from rural areas. And making it harder for these folks who are already struggling to get access to SNAP, because we will help people, or we will connect them to resources. We are no wrong door, because luckily we have a board of supervisors that will fund us to the point that we have some capacity to do so. But this system is not working, and every time we try to tell them, we touch grass, please talk to us about how to do this better. They're like, we really need to de-silo and we really need to align better. And I'm like, there's no alignment in the world good enough if you don't have the workforce, if you don't have the resources, if you aren't, communicating. We had to put out, and I'm sorry I keep going on about this, but we had to put out information about what folks could do, because the state put out literally no information about people being kicked off of Medicaid.
Yep. Yeah.
None.
I think
Yeah.
you're
Thank
completely
you.
right. And, just to think about it, 166,000 Iowans coming off of Medicaid, I mean, that's 5% of the state of Iowa. That's massive. And I would love to think that there's 166,000 Iowans who qualified for Medicaid 2 years ago and don't now because they have great new jobs. But the truth is that's not what's going on. What's going on is a government that's making it more and more difficult for Iowans to access basic services that they need. And so I think, to the point that Senator Wahls made earlier in the discussion, at the same time that Republicans try to distract people with these culture war issues, they are taking away services that Iowans desperately need. And it's wrong. It's extremely disappointing, again, that my bill on this topic has not even been assigned to a subcommittee meeting. And when we have to take real action, because 166,000 Iowans losing those services is it's unacceptable.
I was talking to an internal medicine physician yesterday who works at UIHC, who was telling me about the difference in the population, the people they see coming into the emergency room now, and the people that they have to discharge, who are malnourished, who have many challenges, and in a world that I think most of us would like to live in would never have those challenges to begin with, but they don't have the capacity to help many of them because of the serious issues that they have and that they go home to. They still won't have the food they need. They won't have the medical care.
One more point, sorry. When the public health emergency ended, Governor Beshear in Kentucky requested and received a waiver from the federal government to not kick any children off of Medicaid. And Governor Reynolds could have easily done the same thing. And, I won't speculate on why she hasn't done it, but it is a decision to kick children off of Medicaid.
Diane, I would just say, in response to your specific question about the data, it has been a little bit less than a year since we passed the bill, and I don't remember when it actually got signed into law. And so my instinct would be that I would be looking about a year out from the application of those changes before we would actually even begin to be able to see the data that shows the reality of the situation. We have, I mean, the anecdotes, we're all hearing them, but the data, I have not seen yet. Maybe this fall.
Okay. I think we have time for one more quick question, if anyone has one.
This is not going to be a question. What I would say is that people should go to Iowa County and Washington County, because those people are supposed to be representing all of you. If they can't stand the heat, they should get out of the kitchen.
Amen.
I really appreciate the fact that you're all here. I've been around this for 30-some years, and I've only seen one Republican sit at that table in those 30-some years.
Mm-hmm.
They need to realize they're representing all of us, whether they like what we think, whether they dislike what we think, they need to be here. And I apologize because I am upset about this, and I do absolutely believe that you need to go to Iowa County and Washington County and sit in on their forums, because they're supposed to be representing the Republicans in Johnson County too, and they're not doing that.
And Ron, you deserve to have someone looking out for Hills Elementary. Roger.
Yeah, I think, so actually yesterday we had our monthly meeting. Representatives from Iowa City Community School District, representatives who cover Iowa City Community School District and several other school districts in the area are invited one Friday a month to meet with our school board, with our superintendent, hear about school issues. Last year when we had those meetings, we had a lot of conversations about what the voucher program giveaway to private schools would mean for Hills Elementary. And the representative who represents Hills Elementary was never there. Not once. And, I think about what it could mean for the city of Hills to lose their school. It's really a disaster.
Adam, tell her name.
Yeah, her name is Heather Hora.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't always know who their representative is. So she's running for re-election because she likes her job. And I think we just need to know that that's who's not here, that's who's not showing up.
Senator Dawn Driscoll represents that area and is also up for re-election. Just over a week ago, we all got tons of emails and are still getting them on AEAs. I got a couple of emails where we were invited to come shadow a special education teacher. I took one of them up on it. Last Friday, I drove down to Wellman in Washington County and shadowed a special education teacher who works with pre-K and alternative kindergarten kids, and talked to her and her colleagues, and spent the afternoon there. Learned a huge amount, and have many takeaways from that. But one of the takeaways was she didn't just email all of us. She specifically personally emailed Representative Hora and Senator Driscoll, and I'm the only one who took her up on it.
Okay.
There went all of Dave's bright spots.
Did I mention the Midwest Rail Pack?
You did, and thank you for that. So thanks to all of you, those with questions, those with responses, for an informative session. We will conclude this forum with closing remarks from each of our legislators. You each have 3 minutes. And Representative Zabner, let's start with you.
Well, thank you. I want to go back to what I started with. I'm very, very proud to have passed my first bill this week, and that it could be a bipartisan bill out of a very bipartisan committee in the Natural Resources Committee. And I said the same thing last month. I'll say it this month. We don't want to come here and just complain about what Republicans are doing. We have an agenda for how we can make this state better, solve problems that we're hearing about from Iowans every day, and that's what we want to go there to do. And so very proud to be able to do that in a small way, and I'm hoping there's bigger things to come.
Thank you so much to the League and to all the partnering organizations and to all of you for joining. We all make it a priority and see it as a requirement of our job to show up and listen. It's our job to listen, and it's your job to come talk to us, whether that means showing up to these forums, whether that means calling, whether that means emailing, whether that means goosing your friends to do the same. So I just want to say I am so grateful for the engagement that I received from House District 89. It is unimaginable that I would vote on something without knowing how my voters feel about it to me. And so thank you so much to all who have been engaged, stayed engaged, and all those who speak up and bring us their perspectives, their concerns, their excitement. It's invaluable. So thank you.
Yes, Representative Levin, I would just say that I don't think that our other colleagues vote without knowing how their constituents feel. They just know what the governor tells them to do. And I also just want to thank everybody for being here and to the League for hosting us every legislative session. I also find these to be incredibly valuable and important. I want to shout out to John Deeth for all of his wonderful advocacy that I received. I'm sure Adam Zabner did as well, on this horrible elections bill that Representative Kaufman, who works for President Trump, is trying to get through. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is there was some, press about the subcommittee for that bill, but the headline was wrong. The headline should have been, "Bill that would make it harder for people with disabilities to vote advances after heated debate." That's what we needed to hear about. Because at that subcommittee, Representative Zabner and I heard from multiple people from multiple different organizations or just personally talk about how the bill would make it more difficult for people to vote. And I think that that's just another one of those instances where, yes, we did hear from people, they just chose not to listen. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month.
As always, thank you to the League for these wonderful forums, and thanks for our local public access networks that run this throughout the month until our next forum. Every session is like a wrestling meet. It's a wrestling match, and right now, as we're at the end of February going into March, we're in the end of the second period, tipping over to the third period. Now, if you want to be a wussy, you can give up, or else you suck it up and you start fighting harder. And that's where everyone at this table, all 6 of us, are going, oh, bring it. Because, you think it's bad? Well, we can take it and we can dish it out. But we're fighting for what we believe in and also what we hear from you. And that's why it's been great. I'm looking at the audience today, and I know at least half of you have been in Des Moines already this year, and that's what also keeps me fired up. After we talk, I walk back in and go, okay, into the second period, you might be down 2-1, but I'm going to take that son of a gun, and we're going to keep on fighting for you locally. But thank you so much for the encouragement, and I look forward to our next forum.
Thank you for bringing up some really important points. Thank you for showing up again and again. One thing that we've seen this session, and it's only my second session, but the flood that we continue to get on AEAs has made a difference, and it's continuing to make a difference. It's been changed twice. It's probably going to be changed another time on both sides. Have no idea what it's going to look like at the end at this point. We have all introduced a lot of really good bills. We have a really positive agenda on the Democratic Senate side as well as on the Democratic House side, and that's one message that we want people to hear. We have been able to make some important impacts in subcommittees. I've been able to get some local government bills changed so that they actually come out as good bills when they went in as wait, what are you trying to do? And once they actually clarify what they're trying to do, it's like, well, then say it in the bill. So we've had a couple of those move through, and I'm really pleased to have had some influence on that. One of the odd things about the whole Religious Freedom Restoration Act debate that Senator Wahls was referring to is some of the strongest lobbyists against it, who spoke out the strongest against it, is the business community across Iowa. We don't hear a lot from the business community on laws that are discriminatory, but we heard a lot from them, and it was quite striking to me that our Republican colleagues completely ignored that point. I was also on the subcommittee for these great election bills, for the great election bill. And I would like to say we do not have election integrity issues. We just don't. We have fair and free elections thanks to people like Travis and John in our auditor's office and the 98 other auditors' offices around the state. So anything they say that it tries to spin it like that, it's just not the case. We don't need to be cutting out drop boxes. We don't need to be making it harder for folks to vote by mail. We simply don't. So please continue to let your voices be heard, and thank you so much for showing up today.
I'll just add, if you're working on a bill clearing the way for Donald Trump to run for president, I would avoid the word integrity.
If you're getting a paycheck from him, yeah.
Well, I just want to say thanks again to everybody for showing up this morning and spending part of your Saturday with us and staying engaged and involved. It's always, just like Dave said, it's great to see people, friendly faces at the State House. It really is helpful for us, and it helps us dig down and find that strength to carry on and keep fighting, because as you've heard today, there's a lot of awful stuff in Des Moines that we're fighting against every single day. I think that one of the things that really stands out to me, just based on the conversation today, is how many bills the Republicans have moved forward that are trying to solve problems that they've created, right? There are so many things that we see that are real issues in this state that are in fact the result of very poor governance by the Republican Party, which has now had trifecta control of state government in Iowa for almost a decade. And so I think it's really important for us to stay focused on what we all care about, right? Which is a better Iowa, a stronger Iowa, where people are coming together, where people are happy and proud to live here, to call this state home, and to want to raise a family here, to retire here, to work here. And until we have a state government that is actually going to be responsive to people, until we have legislators who show up and listen to their constituents, we're not going to have that. And so I want to say thank you to everybody in this room who is not just showing up to legislative forums, but is also going out of their way to actually work on the campaigns that are going to be necessary to actually elect legislators and a new governor who are actually going to listen to the people of the state and be focused on solving the real problems, not just the ones that they've manufactured as a part of the culture war. So thanks again to the League, and thanks to all of you for showing up today.
Can I make one more quick point? Sure. Senator Weiner, you reminded me of something that we are now seeing the business community start to register on these terrible culture war bills, and that's new. They have not been doing that historically. And I just want to give a shout out to our House, Democratic leadership, specifically Jennifer Confirst, who hopefully you all had a chance to meet last November, for going after them and saying, these bills are making it harder for you to have the workforce that you need. You need to start speaking up. And they said, but we're scared the governor will cut us out. And she said, you need to start registering on these. And it's just been a major push that hasn't really happened in the past. And we're starting to see a little bit of a change. So it's just one of those little glimmers of hope that we have as members of the minority. We're pushing and pushing and pushing and bring it on for sure. And it's starting to make a little bit of a difference. So please keep pushing.
Okay. I want to just take this opportunity to thank the local television staff for recording this event, live streaming it on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of the forum will be run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV, so you can see their respective websites for programming. Our next forum will focus on public safety. It will be held March 30th from 9:30 to 11:30 here at the Center Assembly Room. So please join us. Thank you all for coming today. And a special thank you to our legislators. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts. And thank you for your continued work on our behalf. Hang in there. Thanks.